So the M1 iPad Pro, it does have an incredible display, especially that mini LED on the 12.9-inch model. It's also got a few tricks up its sleeve, like that new center stage feature. But when it was released, my initial take was summed up by saying, well, the M1 MacBook Air that I purchased is now obsolete. Well, I was wrong. Let me explain. Hey, it's Andrew, and I am addicted to technology, so if we're meeting for the first time, I hope you stick around. Check me out on the socials and consider subscribing while I tell you why I was wrong about the new M1 iPad Pro. So first, about my MacBook Air. You see, this computer is a great machine and a really good value. I sometimes think I should have paid the extra $250 for the M1 MacBook Pro, where I could have gotten some slightly snappier performance, a brighter screen, and a little bit more battery life. But with my savings, I was able to buy other things to add to my work from home setup, like this cool Anker Power Expand USB-C dock that I would definitely recommend to anyone that may need one for their work remote setup. I'll leave a link to this in the description if anybody's interested. The point is, for the same budget, I was able to add some accessories to expand my MacBook's usefulness. I mean, I didn't need to do that, but the value of the MacBook Air is what gave me that flexibility. Now, yeah, I know, I'm not saying the MacBook Air is cheap, but for what it is a good value. It starts at $899 for the base model. I paid about $1650 for this configuration, which is the 8-core GPU with 1 terabyte of storage and 16 gigabytes of unified memory. The new M1 iPad Pro, in comparison, starts at $799 for the 11-inch model. So to make this comparison make a little bit more sense, we're gonna stick to just the 12.9-inch model, which starts at $1099. Then spec'd out to the same as my MacBook Air, that's 1 terabyte of storage and 16 gigabytes of unified memory, which is still the first time you can select how much memory you get in your iPad. That pushes the price all the way up to $1799. Then if you wanted to make it more of a desktop computer-like experience, you still need to add something like Apple's Magic Keyboard with trackpad for another $350. Or maybe you can just use the Smart Keyboard Folio and use a compatible Bluetooth mouse, because remember, Apple did give us mouse support on the iPad sometime late last year. Roughly all in though, you're looking at about $2150 for a tablet. Because remember, the iPad Pro still only runs iPad OS. That's right. Much like a lot of people were expecting or hoping, and I'll include myself in that, Apple showed no signs at WWDC that the iPad Pro will be able to run macOS. So the iPad is more expensive. But that isn't exactly a case why my MacBook Air is obsolete. That is more of an argument why my MacBook Air is more practical, especially if you're constrained by budget. I'll admit, my eyes were opened by some other videos I've watched, particularly by Greg over on Greg's Gadgets. I encourage you to check out his channel and one of his videos about why he doesn't even want macOS on his iPad. And I'll leave a link to his channel and the video in the description. I encourage you to go give that a watch. Greg makes some very good points that made me really think. The MacBook is a computer, something we're all too familiar with. You interact with it using, well, a keyboard and a mouse, or in this case, a trackpad. And also, like we are all familiar with, you cannot interact with it by touching the screen. The iPad, on the other hand, was made to be interacted with by simply touching the screen. It was made to be simple to use. And yes, that has changed over time to be able to use a keyboard and now mouse with it. but the main interface was and still is the touchscreen. And like my 3-year-old son would probably tell you if he could articulate it, this is what makes it simple for someone who has never used it before to learn. And that was kind of the point. This is, of course, enabled by Apple's impressive hardware that has always really led the way for how a touch interface should respond. But it's also the software, the OS that enables its ability. That's where I've downplayed iPad OS. Since the M1 can now run Mac OS, and we've seen on the desktop machines, I was really hoping that someone would figure out a way to install Mac OS on the iPad Pro, so we can finally see what a touch screen Mac would look like. Apple didn't give us this at WWDC, but, well, my friends, I've done it. I have put Mac OS on my iPad. Actually, I didn't. This isn't even an iPad Pro, let alone the M1 model. Actually, I just used Sidecar with my Mac to show what the Mac OS may look like on an iPad. Now, it doesn't completely provide what the experience would be like, but it gives some glimpses. And no, it doesn't even let you use touch to do anything. Sidecar simply acts as another display and can even give you a MacBook Pro touch bar at the bottom if you're one of the few who like that kind of thing. But when I was playing with this, you can see Mac OS just isn't built for touch, at least not right now. A simple way to illustrate this is the close, minimize, and maximize button in the top left. They're too close together to be used with touch. You'd end up just fat fingering everything. And I know, this is just one slight thing I'm highlighting, but it shows that the OS is still focused on being controlled with a keyboard and a mouse. In its current form, it would just feel clunky and likely frustrating to use. Apple is not always the first with adding common features. Take cut, copy, and paste on the iPhone, for example. But they tend to get it right when they do eventually add them. There have been touch-enabled laptops out there for years, but I haven't read about any really being captivating enough to force Apple to really devote any resources to doing this on a Mac. Like I said, Apple usually isn't first with things like this, but usually the experience is completely thought through. So if this is something on Apple's roadmap, then I am confident it will be deployed in a way that makes it feel like macOS was always built to be used with touch. But I know the M1 chip is in an iPad now. But wasn't it always? It has, at least in its previous form. We know this. The A14 was also an ARM-based processor, and that was already in the iPad Pro. And it was already an impressive processor. But come on, you can't take a tablet-grade processor and put it in a desktop. That would be going backwards. Instead, you need to make it look like you'd put a desktop-class processor in a tablet. Now that will get some attention. The iPad Pro does have some very cool hardware advancements outside of the processor that should not get ignored though. That display, I've read some very positive reviews. I don't even have one for myself, so I can't speak about it firsthand, but the specs alone are super impressive, and one can only think that innovation like that have to make its way to the Mac at some point. The Pro XDR Retina display MacBook Air. Yeah, Apple should do that. I just created the highest end, low end computer in Apple's lineup, and if that actually happens, I may just have to trade mine in. I love my MacBook Air, I really do. I prefer the desktop operating system experience for my everyday needs, and I have rarely felt like I needed touch to make it any better. It does help that the MacBook trackpad is probably the best on the market too. What I do need, however, is a better webcam and machine learning to help keep me in frame when I move around on my video calls. So bring center stage to the Mac. Those are my two guesses on what we'll see soon in Apple's roadmap. Groundbreaking, I know. A kick-ass mini LED display and an ultra-wide webcam with machine learning to auto pan and zoom. I'm all about what's useful. Don't waste my time with making a MacBook Pro blue or green. Hey, thanks for watching. If you got any value from this video, I hope you consider subscribing and give me a like. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Peace.